Hello, my name is Bob Heilbrunner, for those of you who don't know me. And I'm this is the talk I'm giving to the class 8 of a course I'm teaching at the local extension service of the local university. Um, and the course is called Support and Sustenance for Living a Meaningful Life in Difficult Times. And it's obviously it's a course that's directed at the MAGA experience and the looming of fascism. Um, but it's also a course that I've been teaching for a couple of years, and that sees the MAGA phenomenon as not just the sociopathy of a badly damaged human being, but as a symptom of a failing paradigm, a failing system, which I'm calling the paradigm of narcissism. And I'm saying that that paradigm of narcissism brings its assumptions and worldview, and therefore its institutions and structures, into every sphere of our life. And the course is organized around how we can be conscious of and aware of and resist and transform the paradigm from a paradigm of narcissism to a paradigm of communion or wholeness or membership, in short, to a paradigm which recognizes the interdependence of everything, and the fact that we're all in this together. What the Native Americans called all our relations, that the rivers and the streams and every living thing, and the canyons, are all our relations, and that we are part of and belong. But today's talk is about how that narcissistic paradigm, which is also the fascist paradigm, because I'm saying that fascism is the way that the narcissistic paradigm manifests in its extreme form in the political sphere. But anyway, this class is talking about economics and politics, that sphere. And I'm interested in it because I think mainstream economics theory is sort of the purest expression of capitalist ideology and of narcissistic ideology. I studied it in high school, I studied it in college, and then I studied it at the PhD level, coming away with an MA at Berkeley. And what I discovered was that it's the exact same model, only at a higher level of abstraction and higher mathematical level of higher and higher mathematical modeling. But it's basically increasing levels of mathematical sophistication, an increasing level of the same assumptions, and an increasing distance from the reality of life as it's lived in a capitalist system. So the basic familiar narcissistic ideology appears in its reduced and mathematicized form in economics, in mainstream economics. And so the familiar signs of that ideology are, one, that if everyone acts solely out of their selfish interest, you're going to get a good social result. That's the basic assumption. If everybody is out to screw everyone else, somehow we're going to get a good society out of it. If everyone acts solely out of their selfish interests, that somehow is going to create a good social result. and that therefore there's no need to have institutions that promote the social good or the general interest of society. In fact, there is no general interest of the whole except what arises automatically from the pursuit of selfish interests. So this is the basic structure of the greed is good for everyone ideology. Now, the idea that a good society results from everyone selfishly trying to screw everyone else or selfishly just trying to maximize their selfish interest, there's a couple of things about that. The first one is that it's counterintuitive and it's pretty unlikely. Seems pretty unlikely. And in no sphere of our life do we experience that people being selfish and screwing each other makes for a good family, a good county, a good government, and a good world. It's just not anyone's experience and therefore completely counterintuitive. But it's also counter any moral spiritual tradition that ever existed, from do unto others to the law of karma. And another problem with it is that but it comes down to ideology of greed is good. Now, there is some foundation for that, for everybody pursuing their interest being in the general interest. And the founder of the economic theory for that is Adam Smith. And Adam Smith said that the magic guardian of the general good is the invisible hand. Oh, this is visible. The invisible hand of the competitive marketplace. The invisible hand of the competitive marketplace. And this theory, of course, happened at a time when farmers were the basic largest producers of capitalist goods. But the point is that the invisible hand makes for the good. It's an impersonal force. It requires no personal ethics. It's automatic. No personal or social ethics. It's automatic. Now, there's some truth to it. And contra the medieval thing where the surplus of what the peasants did beyond what they needed just for their own survival, the surplus was used by the nobles for luxury goods and warfare. And the big change was when the capitalist elite became the ruling elite instead of the feudal lords, was that capitalists, it started with merchant capitalists, but then went on to capitalist producers, that capitalists reinvest the surplus into creating more surplus. They don't just use it on luxuries and lifestyle, although they do, but basically they're motivated to reinvest it in service of maximizing an even greater profit. And historically, that made for an historically unprecedented motor for increase in productivity. And according to Smith's model, the competitive marketplace makes capitalists, one, produce what people want, namely what people demand, economic demand, but serve the people because it serves the demand of the people and makes what people want. And that maximizing profit means increasing efficiency, cutting costs, labor costs and material costs, and cutting the costs of production, so that there's a tremendous motor and motivation to increase how much you can make and how cheaply you can make it, and that ultimately everybody, because of the competition, everybody benefits from that because the prices go down as the cost of producing the stuff for the makers goes up. So that's the historical benefit, and that we live in a level of productivity and luxury that never existed before. We live better than medieval lords who didn't have hot running water. So we see those benefits, but we're also starting to see the costs of investing the social surplus according to what maximizes profit maximization. That is, the surplus doesn't belong to the working people who do it. It doesn't belong to the society. It belongs to the corporation. When we're at the corporate level, the corporation that produces the stuff, and the corporation then reinvests the surplus, which is the society surplus, into whatever is most profitable. And the right-wing argument then is that since profit maximization is in everyone's interest, that regulations, such as regulations for safety, for workers' rights, for product safety, for the environmental effects of stuff, for the technologically produced unemployment and so forth, any regulations about that will increase the costs of corporations and therefore reduce their profit, and therefore be a hindrance on the profit-making machine, which by this ideology is in service of everyone. And ultimately that the unrestricted growth of private profit eventually trickles down, this is the famous trickle-down theory, trickles down to the society as a whole. So, and that's the right-wing argument, is that you're interfering with the healthy functioning of the economy, which is in everyone's interest, when you try in any way to regulate or restrict the profit-making ability of corporations, of increasingly large corporations. Now, I want to arm you with some arguments against that theory. And because that theory is used, so that economic theory is really the ideologically most potent weapon of conservative economics, of conservative politics. So one, yes, producers produce for demand. And the argument goes that by serving demand, they serve the people. Well, but it's not demand in the terms of human needs, it's demands in terms of dollars. So it's $1, one demand vote, not one person. And that means that the demand for yachts may be greater than the demand for affordable housing, or the demand for fancy restaurants and luxury goods. It may be more than demand for the basic needs of ordinary people. And that's true because of the incredible unequal distribution of wealth in our society. Now, I brought that up. There was a lecture, huge lecture. I was in one of the introductory economic at Berkeley economic theory lectures, and the guy was showing all these charts why serving demand is a good thing. And I said, well, but demand is it's only demand if there's money, if there's money to pay for the demand. Demand is based on income and on money. Isn't that a flaw in this argument? And the professor said, this argument is true if you don't like the distribution of wealth, then go do something about that. But this theory is correct. So essentially what he said was that he has a beautiful theory, but it doesn't apply if there's a great inequality of income. But that's not his problem. That was for the political system to somehow solve. So he sort of washed his hands of that issue. But not only that, the system systematically produces an inequality of income. It systematically produces. It's not an exogenous factor that we can have a dial and adjust so the theory works. But it's intrinsic to the capitalist system, is a growing inequality of income. Two, Adam Smith's argument works for a competitive market, but we are not in a competitive market. We're in an oligopolistic market in which multinational corporations have enormous power. And not only that, and that's also not an exogenous factor, that's intrinsic to a system in which big fish eat little fish, and ultimately you're going to have bigger and bigger fish. And we see that in the concentration of monopoly power and one huge corporation swallowing up another, and now first there were two and now there are one. So the principles that apply to a competitive system do not apply to a system of multinational monopoly corporations. But the third, and this is an argument, third argument that I want to arm people with, is called externalities. Externalities. Because only the costs that enter into the corporate bottom line are taken into account by a profit maximizing calculus. The profit maximizing calculus weighs the corporate costs and against the corporate profit, corporate income. So only those costs that enter into the corporate bottom line are taken into account. Costs that they can pass on to the public are not part of the costs included in the profit-making calculus, and therefore are not taken care of by the economic system. Now, this notion was first discussed in relationship to pollution, and when it was sort of discovered that the pollution was only considered in corporate investment if society forces corporations to pay for the costs of pollution. The costs that can pass on to the public or to the environment are not part of the costs included in corporate profit-making strategy. Now, externalities kind of sounds like it's an exception or an amendment to mainstream economic theory, which is actually how it came out. But if we take a larger social view, there's a universe of things not considered in the profit maximization calculus, and therefore that are external. In fact, our universe, there's a universe of things that aren't considered, and it happens to be our universe, the one that we live in. So examples, whether what gets produced is beneficial or harmful. You know, there's always the question, can we do it? And if we can do it and it makes profit, we'll do it. Not should we do it, not is it good for the world or society. The conditions of work, including safety, or whether the work is meaningful or boring, are not part of the profit making, are external to the decision making of corporations. The costs of community support, building infrastructure, roads, schools, and communities competing to provide infrastructure for corporations, to attract corporations. Labor saving technology and methods, and unemployment that results are external. Now that may still be worth it, but the costs of it are just left for unemployed people and perhaps for society to the extent that society helps take care of unemployed people or that is victim of the crimes of desperately poor people. Um, and the environmental effects, including global warming and melting ice caps. Those are all not taken care of by the profit maximization. They have to be taken care of by a social process um, that limits and focuses on private profit production. And the biggest by far is the political effects of corporate economic power, the political effects of corporate economic. And that's where we get to the issue of how do you run a democratic political system on top of an economic system that doesn't even pretend to be democratic. And if you've worked for just about any organization, including the government, and you make certain suggestions, you're likely to be told that you are an employee and this is not a democracy. The decisions are not being made by the people doing the work, but by some higher bureaucracy. So how do you run a political system on top of it, a democratic political system on top of an economic system that doesn't even pretend to be democratic? Now, there's a couple of ways that this happens. One is there's a direct influence of private capital on the political system, which includes direct financial campaign support and advertisements for political issues. And that's been, since I can't think of the name of it, but something United, Supreme Court decision, basically corporations were deemed to be people and therefore to have a right to privacy and therefore not to disclose their financial contributions. So that's gotten worse and worse and worse. But two, there's a systemic influence, which is that if a political leader does not provide a good business climate, he or she is likely to be met with a capital strike. That is to say, corporations won't invest because it's not a good business climate. And they won't invest, and then you'll have unemployment, and you'll have stagnation, and you'll have a depression, and the economy tanks. The economy tanks on your watch. Now, of course, this dynamic is based on the expectation that they can get a more favorable business climate next time around, and therefore make higher profits later. So they hold off on their investment. So they would invest at a much lower profit rate if they knew and believed for political and social reasons that was the best they could get. But insofar as they have a lot of influence on the political system, they can bargain with the political system by doing a capital strike. And if you're president of the United States during a capital strike and not creating a business climate that's satisfactory for large corporations, you're in very bad trouble. So that means that we need a social process to channel private profit maximizing investments into socially positive purposes, such as the environment, housing, healthcare. Now that's difficult because multinational corporations escape the power of the nation state. They're international. They aren't subject in some ways to the nation state. So that means you would need an international corporation, of which there are some proposals, and for instance, that there would be an agreement to internationally equalize taxes so that countries aren't competing for attracting corporations by having lower taxes or stricter restrictions on labor movements and stuff. And to have the states not compete, that's, for who can provide, who's attracting, which states can attract the most investment by having the most pro-business environment. And often that means the most restricted labor and environmental laws. And perhaps the most important externality is the power of the military-industrial complex. And those costs, borne by the public, borne by all of us, include the overthrow of foreign regimes that are not favorable to investment by U.S. corporations, imperialism, wars, the horrors of wars, imperialist wars, and death. All good for corporate business, arms makers, and for foreign investors. But that's a place, the whole actions of the military-industrial complex and making the world safe for American business investment is a huge cost in money, but also in human lives, American and foreign. So we come to the same conclusion as in every other sphere of the narcissistic paradigm. One, that favoring of the top at the expense of the base, favoring the top at the expense of the base, being exploitive of and unaccountable to the base, whether the base is nature or ordinary human beings, and that's one, and two, failing the two basic principle of the narcissistic paradigm showing up now in this sphere, favoring to honor that the whole has requirements that transcend the polarities of the parts. That is to say that the welfare of the parts depends on the health of the whole. And that's true of cells in the body. The cells in the body wait a minute. The welfare of the parts of the cells depends on the health of the whole, the body. And then those cells that are antisocial, such as a cancer cell, and that want to ultimately lead to the death of the body, are essentially stupid because they are operating on a selfish principle and not aware of the fact that the needs of the whole are foundational for their welfare. Now, building a national and international system that recognizes that we're all in this together may seem like long odds as we look at the state of the world and the forces that divide us. But the view that the top can thrive without respecting the bottom, the ground, the condition of its being, and without accountability to the bottom, is proving to be an unsustainable delusion. Every system of power, from the divine right of kings to the ideology of capitalism, every system of power ultimately rests on the claim that it serves the welfare and needs of the whole. When that claim becomes unconvincing, heads roll, literally, heads roll, royal heads roll, and the system's institutions are challenged to change or fall. So two periods, this is very abbreviated here, but two periods in American political history where the concentration of the economic system's concentration of power provoked a political backlash, were the period of the robber barons, the period of the armed smashing of the attempt to smash the labor movement, and the Great Depression, two real crisis periods when the the national economic system was at great risk. The first provoked the antitrust reforms of Teddy Roosevelt, and the second, FDR's New Deal. Both were a political response to the delusion that the top can indefinitely expand its power and privilege while excluding the vast majority of the population. So the New Deal was an underconsumption crisis where profit grew, but the working people and poor people, but let's say the working people were not included in the growth of profit, and therefore couldn't buy the stuff that they made, and therefore ultimately the economy tanked. And the economy tanked because it didn't recognize that you had to cut the population into your profit growth, at least to some extent, which is why Roosevelt was said to have saved capitalism against its will, saved capitalism. And that then later got solved by selling the stuff abroad, so that you're no longer counting on American workers as foundational for the demand for the society's products, and that's why the new system has escaped its accountability for now. So when the system fails, when the system fails to meet the needs of enough of the population, it provokes a movement for institutional reform, backed by a new way of looking at and understanding the way the world works, a new system of values gleaned from the failures of the old. And the birth of a new way of being in the world and a new way of living in the world is opposed by the entrenched powers of the dominant system, which tries to impose its institutions and its values by dividing the people and misdirecting their anger and frustration at the fellow victims of the victims of the system's failures, the poor, the minorities, the whoever the scapegoats are. We are presently at such an inflection point, as happens throughout history, which brings us back to our opening discussion of the right trouble. Michael Meade says the world is always in trouble. The trick is to be in the right trouble. And you will remember that the right trouble is not defined by its ultimate result, which belongs to the future and is not given us to know, but by what it brings out in us in meeting it. The right trouble is defined by what it brings out in us in meeting it. What we learn from it, what we bring to it, what flowers in us in meeting it, what gives us a sense of belonging and meaning and our place in the whole. What gives us a sense of belonging and meaning and our place in the whole. What helps us discover why we're here, why we were given this ticket to ride. And part of that, I'll remind you, is the Angelus Arian thing. Our job is to be the best that we can be, with all assertion of our right to be and all our humility in terms of the limits of our power to affect the world. And that's Angelus Arian's four principles that she says that she gleaned from an overview of spiritual views of the world was: one, show up, do your best, speak the truth. And the hard one, don't be attached to the results. Again, because the results belong to the future. Now, based on this, I want to encourage a discussion. And that discussion is based on, again, on Michael Meade, who is a storyteller and a mentor and a mythologist. And his mentoring myth. Now, a myth in his book is not a myth is a story that speaks to a truth that's universal enough that it keeps being told, that it keeps living. But it's a story. Anyway. So his mentoring story, when he teaches, supports mentors, is this. The ancestors are watching the world and caring about it and love it and connected to it. And the ancestors, when they see some big trouble or something that really needs to be healed and fixed, they send new beings down to help. And in this story, before they send them down, they give them their instructions. They tell them what they're here for. They tell them why they're being given what their mission is in the world. And it gets clarified. But then as the people are getting born, the moment they leave the womb and hit the air, they are so amazed at the glory and beauty and power and reality of the world that they forget their mission. They forget what they were told. And that means that the rest of their life is basically an exploration of discovering their mission, of discovering why they were here, why they're here, and discovering what they were sent to do. And in the mentoring, in supporting mentors, he says, so the mentor's job is not to tell people what they should do or want to do or need to do. The mentor is to help people discover for themselves, because only they know, to support the mentoree's search for why they're here, what they're here for, what they need to do, should be doing. Not should, but what they're here to do. And so the mentor might say, I noticed that when you do your art, you really seem excited and full of life, But the mentor doesn't say, your art is very good and you should go to art school because you're talented. Okay. So the question for our discussion is, we've been around a while. We've had quite a lot of years to explore and search for and discover or not discover why we're here, what our mission is. So what have we discovered our mission to be so far? What have we each sort of discovered what we're here for, what fulfills us, what we have to offer? And what does it tell us about what we have to offer in the transition from a paradigm that nature is asking us to make, from a paradigm of narcissism to a paradigm of holism and communion and belonging. What is our place? What is each of our place? What do we have to offer, and what is our place based on whatever we've discovered in our years on the planet? What is our place, and what do we have to offer in the transition to a new, to discover, to a new, to humanity discovering a new way to live on the planet? So I'm going to offer a meditation to ground us for this discussion. Um, so make yourself comfortable. You don't have to be in any particular position or whatever, just make yourself comfortable. And let yourself sort of enter your body. Let your consciousness enter and fill your body. Feel the weight of your sits bones in the chair. Feel the weight of your body where it touches the ground and what supports you. Take a couple of gentle breaths. Notice that the world supports you, that it feeds you air that your body knows how to use, and that fuels your body. And notice that you send out CO2, which helps fuel and nourish the green things on the planet that make the energy that supports all life. And feel the livingness in you. Feel everything that tells you that you are a living being and not a marble statue of yourself. Every way that you directly experience without need of a middleman or a witness, that you directly experience as the life force working in you, as all of the exchanges and rhythms and currents and waves and flows and pulsations that are life within you. And see what life has offered you. Feel what life is offering you in the moment, what being alive and living is offering you in the moment. Experience your membership in the ebbs and flows and rhythms of life. And notice how the life inside you is part of an extension of life outside of you. How life inside you reverberates with life outside you, and the interchange of life outside you and life inside you. And your participation and membership in the life force, and your nourishment and feeding from the life force. And see what it is like to claim your full experientially in your body, what it feels like to claim your full membership and belonging in the process of life. You didn't create yourself, life created you. You didn't choose to be yourself, life chose to give you the opportunity to be yourself. And see in all these years of living on this planet, what life has offered you and what you've learned in all your years on the planet, what you've learned about why you're here, including that you don't know why you're here. What intimations you've gotten, what flavors, what moments, what experiences that have given you a sense of belonging here. You might have a little flash of experiences that shaped your experience of being here and your learning from being here who you are. And see if you can sense as deeply as possible into the center of who you are, into the center of what makes you you. See if you can experience that and live in it. What does it feel like to be fully you? And from that place of being deeply you, of being deeply connected to the deepest part of you, which is also where you're most deeply connected to the nurturance of life itself. What wants to come from that? What do you want to offer from that? What would it feel just right to offer the world from the deepest part of who you are? And notice how that feels, how it feels when you're offering yourself to the world in the deepest way and from the deepest experience of who you are, which is your deepest experience of why you're here and your deepest experience of your place and belonging in the whole. And what from that place do you have to offer your fellow humans in support of the transition to humans learning how to belong in peaceful, respectful membership with the whole, in being good and rightful citizens of the whole? What does that feel like? And you may be that there's a movement or a gesture that wants to happen from that place. And if you do that, just let it happen. Let whatever wants to happen from that place of you-ness and what would it be like to live your life moving authentically from your most central you-ness. And when you're ready, Open your eyes slowly, at first with soft focus, and then look around and notice the amazing group of folks that you're sharing this experience with. And now let's share and discuss what we know about why we each are here and what we each may offer, what we each have to offer in the transition that nature is asking of us. And I think that's all I want to say on this tape.